Seriously, you guys, it's so good. You should absolutely read the Chronicles of Hanuvar. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to be talking about the newest entry, Shadow of the Smoking Mountain, which is number 3 in the Chronicles of Hanuvar by Howard Andrew Jones, as well as kind of a general, like, talking about the series and why you should read it. This will be entirely non-spoiler because I know it's hard to do like a full non-spoiler review of book 3, so that's why I'm combining this into a little bit of both of that type of video. So it's not going to be full why you should read. It's not going to be full review. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. So it's probably going to end up with the "Let's Talk About" title, so that people don't get angry that I mischaracterized the video. But this book is super good, which I started with, and this series as well. I have just really been enjoying. So the first 2 books I will note are Lord of a Shattered Land and The City of Marble and Blood. They have this definitely this kind of classic style art, and these are both the series in general is sword and sorcery, but it is updated in a much more modern way. And for me, I found I enjoy it quite a lot more than a lot of the older stuff that I've read. So I feel like this kind of gives you the best of both worlds, because there's a lot of influences, and in some cases there's homage to like his influence is, and the classic kind of sword and sorcery things that he's been interested in. So if you've read some of that stuff, I think you're really going to enjoy like the extra Easter eggs. But if you're like me and you've not really read as much, or in some cases it hasn't worked out as well, I feel like you still get a lot of that here. This is book 3. There will be more, but this is sort of the end of the arc. The first 3 books are acting as that arc, and so there's more to come, but this one really does close out what's been started. And so that's where I feel like this is a good time to talk about the series a little bit overall as well. And in general, this is taking place. Hanuvar is sort of an analog for Hannibal, and it is after his home country of Volanus is just razed and destroyed by the Dervan Empire. He is on a mission to free his people that were taken as slaves and just kind of move them to somewhere else so that they can live free. And so instead of following like the actual while the wars are happening, where he was the general, or having him just be on this quest for revenge, his real goal is he's just trying to save his people and get them out. And that's the main goal and the arc that we're looking at in these first 3 books. They have a very episodic feel, especially books 1 and 3, I would say, where each chapter is almost like its own novella, where you have some different elements, and there's all kinds of cool elements where you have, just normal fantasy. You have ones that are kind of like in homage, or like, showing commentary to this. You have cosmic horror elements, like, some old like Lovecraft stuff, some old sword and sorcery kinds of things. You have some where there's magic, you have some where there's not. There's just such a wide variety, and it's really engaging because there's so many different things going on. Also, if you're reading like one chapter and you're like, I'm not a huge fan of this one, well, then maybe the next one will end up being one that you really enjoy. And there are a few of these chapters throughout all 3. There were only maybe a handful that I was like, but I still think each one kind of does something interesting, whether it's establishing something about the character of Hanuvar, whether it's adding some world building, or just kind of playing around with some tropes in a fresh way, which Howard Andrew Jones does a fantastic job with just playing around with so many tropes. Book 2, I felt slightly different in that it still had the same structure, but it was a little bit more of a specific ongoing plot. It was a little bit less episodic because it needed to establish some things and get some stuff set up. That's not to say that it has like, book 2 or middle book syndrome either, because it wasn't. It was excellent. It just was a little bit different, and so I was happy to go back to book 3, which felt much more episodic in that way, and expanded on some things, showed some, we get to see some different characters a little bit more, see some different things a little bit more, and it just is set up really well. Now, one of the things that is a focus throughout here is that The character of Hanuvar is just fantastic. It's a really great character, and you get to see him as this kind of larger than life figure to start with, and then you get to know the real him a little bit more. Him being in situations that are just crazy, and book three, then I thought especially there was a little bit more introspection with the character Hanuvar, and just analysis, both where the character is kind of looking inward, but also other people kind of really looking at that character. And so I think that was really great. And it just continued to build on and explore and look at that things from the first two books, which I really enjoyed. And just also setting up some, like I said, some really big things as well. In The Shadow of the Smoking Mountain, it's one of those books where it sets up what the big thing is going to be in some ways right off the bat, but then it continues on with so much going on, and nothing is quite what it seems, because Howard Andrew Jones is very good at giving you something straight out, but having some sort of twist or things. And it's not usually like he's trying to pull one over on you. It's just that he's really good at crafting stories so that you'll see like, oh, this is probably what's going to happen here. Or sometimes he'll specifically play around with a trope or like a kind of a thing you might have seen, and then just do something a little bit different with it. And there's such a wide variety of how this is done. He plays with a really cool trope sort of thing in old school sword and sorcery that specifically makes me think of Conan in the second book. And then there's some other things from some series, including some that I've actually not read in the third book as well. But it's just really, like I said, it has the charm of the kind of the old school sword and sorcery, with some of it being very episodic, with not usually having a ton of like crazy magical things, having a normal character as well too. He doesn't really have any magic. He's intelligent and he's very devoted to what he's doing, but doesn't specifically have magic. But just with a modernized, more like I'm trying to say something other than better. An approach that works a little bit better for me. And I think if you're somebody who's more used to modern fantasy, this would be a great one to try something a little bit different. But also, it's written in a much more modern way. I think that's going to appeal to people who are more used to modern fantasy, even though it's still doing a lot of that kind of sword and sorcery stuff. So that's where I think it can bridge both. If you're a big fan of the sword and sorcery stuff, I think you're going to find a lot to love here. If it's not something you've done a lot of, or even if you've done some and not been a huge fan of it overall, because I found for me the biggest thing with some of the old school sword and sorcery is it's a little bit shallow. And partially it's because they weren't trying to go for a lot of depth. It was, doing its own kind of thing. It was usually more about the adventures and light. And so you get a lot of that, but there's a lot more depth to it. So to me, as like the epic fantasy reader, it speaks to me a lot more than some of that stuff does. And it also manages to do the short episodes, although it's, put into reasonable sized books. So I also still feel like I'm reading a longer book and not just reading episodes. So I think it's the author here is done a really great job with how he set this up and sitting there in the middle. And it's just, it's a series that I've really, really enjoyed. Took me really by surprise when I got my review copy of Lord of a Shattered Land. I was really interested, but I was not expecting to love it as much as I did. I've been so excited, and I was really excited to get a chance to have an early review copy of the third book as well. I have my hardcover pre-ordered, and I cannot wait to get it to join it to my collection. So yeah, I feel like it's a great time to talk about. Its book 3 is great. It sticks the landing for the end of the arc, and also still leaves it open for the next book to come out. There's going to be, I think, at least 4 books. I don't recall if there's more than 4, but I know there's going to be at least 4, so I'm not sure if it's just one more coming. But I will keep reading these as long as they're coming out for sure, because they are just really, really great. So it's a good time to get started if you've not started this one already, with the third book being really, like I said, kind of the end of the arc. It's definitely worth checking out with it as well. I will link, because Andrew recently finally got to Lord of a Shattered Land, and he did a video just gushing about it as well, with how much he loved it. So I'll link to that too if you want more excitement about this series. But it's really great. Like I said, I recommend checking it out. As a very strong character, has really interesting plots and worlds, and it just, I think, will appeal to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. So I think it's definitely worth checking out. That's really it for this one, though. So make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description, as always, for my Patreon if you're interested in supporting me over there, as well as the Wizard of the Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether these books, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.